I mean, it was, the movie of prosthetics and overbites.
Damn, man. Yeah, what was up with that? I was like, is that way he really looks? What's going on with
Yeah, he really does. And, it's, you don't always notice it, but Denzel has a pretty decent overbite as well.
Yeah.
But, I thought the acting was really good in it. I didn't care for the ending of the movie a whole lot.
I didn't either. But it wasn't bad. I didn't regret watching it.
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's just not how I would have ended it. But hey,
How was Jared Leto in it?
With his prosthetic nose, he was good.
Yeah, he is full-on creepy Jared Leto mode.
Yeah.
Craig put up a status on Facebook, Matt. You didn't see this, so he said that same thing as Jared Leto plays creepy really well, and a mutual friend of ours, I think it was Russ. So shout out to Russ. Was like, no, I don't know that he was acting. I think that just might be who he is. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. Like
it's hard to tell at this point. Yeah. Hard to tell the difference at this point, whether it's who he really is or if he's just really good at acting that part.
He's such a hit or miss actor for me. Like some things I see him and I think he's just brilliant. Some stuff he's in, I'm just like, I don't know why you got that part. It doesn't make sense.
I have yet to see a movie that I didn't think he was good in. I've seen him take some bad scripts.
Yeah.
And make movies, Suicide Squad, etc. But I don't ever think he's necessarily bad. But that's just my opinion.
No, I don't disagree. There are some things that he does. I'm just like, I don't know why you took the character that way. But I mean, that's neither here nor there.
I watched An American Pickle at like 3:00 in the morning this morning. Which is Seth Rogen playing his great grandfather who gets pickled and comes back, gets released from the pickling solution 100 years later, and plays a current version of himself as well. So he's playing both main roles in the movie.
So it's the Walt Disney story.
Yeah, I mean he would. Yeah, and of course the great grandfather is from he's a Jewish man from Poland, and has some very stringent world views based on him being pickled for 100 years, and you can imagine what happens when he gets a Twitter account. And yeah.
So you're how do you rate this movie?
2.5 out of 5.
Yeah.
It's funny at the beginning of it, and then it gets more serious, and I don't know that it really knows what it's trying to do.
Make money?
Yeah, it was made for HBO Max, so I don't know how the finances work for that stuff, but I'm sure there's money involved. Yes.
Yeah, I would guess there is.
I mean, I don't understand how the made for streaming, make their money, but obviously they do, or they wouldn't be doing it. So,
Trying to think, has there ever been a film with the word pickle in it in the title until now? Is this novel? Is this?
I'm sure the VeggieTales had a movie with the pickle in it.
That doesn't count. Just by virtue of being dumb, that doesn't count. I'm joking.
Yeah, I can't think of a movie that had a pickle name in it before.
I've now alienated the strong VeggieTales enduring portion of our listening audience, and I apologize for that.
Doubt we have a strong VeggieTale enduring portion of our audience.
I don't know, Craig.
I'm pretty sure we've ran them all off by now.
Our listenership has depth and breadth. They are a varied and diverse group of people, and you can tell that if you come to places like our Facebook group, or you check out who's liking our stuff on the Instagram. We're at SFG Podcast there, and the Twitters. But yeah, you can come see some of the folks who listen to this fine podcast. And if you're new, you're wondering, well, what is this fine podcast that you're talking about? Well, let me tell you for a second. We are the Southern Fried Geekery Podcast. My name, checking my driver's license, still says Alexander McKenzie. So that's me, Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Matt Trogdon.
And before I give my name, I'm going to say we got to buy Caleb a Segway for Christmas because he is the king of Segways. My name is Craig Lance.
Oh, it is good to be back. And we are the Southern Fried Geekery Podcast. If my spreadsheets are right and my formula is correct, this is episode 162. It's been a minute. We've been doing this thing for a while. If you are an enjoyer of this, a longtime enjoyer of this show, you know what we do. We sit around, we talk about comics while we sip on some coffee every week on Sunday mornings. Just because we're a couple of friends, we like talking about the funny books. We were sitting around realizing that there's a whole lot of people who they claim to talk about comics, but mostly what they're doing is they're just bitching and moaning, and they're putting out negativity in the world. And so we didn't want to do that. We wanted to get together and talk about books that we enjoyed, or talk about the artistic merit of such things. And so each week we do that. We get together, we talk about some stuff. Maybe we liked it, maybe we didn't, but we're not going to drag it through the mud. We've got a 50-50 rule. If you can't think about 50% of things to say that is good, it's positive, then why talk about it? We've got better things to do, and you've got better things to listen to. We want to welcome you all back. We hope you had great weeks, if that's a possible thing to have, as the world keeps being weird. So how was my brethren? How was your weeks? Week-eye? What's the plural?
Week-eye?
I think it's weeks.
I had a pretty good week. Nothing to write home about because, I have to keep my, negativity going.
Yeah, same here. Mine was good.
Now we haven't got an update. Last week, Craig was tilting against windmills, trying to gather his leaves and put them in a certain spot. How did that go this week, Craig?
They're still in the same fucking spot they were in last Saturday. So I'm going to have to hire somebody to extract the leaves from my yard before spring.
I need to do something similar, or I just need to get time to go out and do it. My week was shitty.
No, good times.
It fucking sucked. This is short of unless I get sexy times in a little bit, this is going to be the highlight of my week. So, crown yourselves, kids. You're the sunshine on my shoulders this week, as you are a lot of the time. So I know you all had busy weeks, but I hope and I pray to, Jack Kirby, Crom, and the rest of the gods, that you were able to read some comics and that you enjoyed your time reading them. So in the spirit of that hopes, why don't Craig, you kick us off and tell me about 3 books you read. We call this our short stack section for those of you who are joining us for the first time, because we like pancakes, and so what better than to have a short stack.
Speaking of my week and pancakes, I made some pancakes yesterday and went to eat them and had no syrup, if that gives you an idea as to my week. I'm beginning to feel like a broken record with my books on my short stack. Daredevil number 26, Marvel Comics, Chip Zdarsky and Mark Cicchetto. This was a tie-in to the King in Black, or King, is it King in Black? King of Black, whatever it is, their ongoing crossover event they're doing right now. And it was pretty good. It's showing us him in jail and dealing with the consequences of that, and a symbiote attacks the prison. So next book is Something is Killing the Children, number 14, James Tynion and Werther Dell'Edera. This book is heading towards its conclusion, and definitely you should be reading it if you're not, because I'm going to keep talking about it until it's done. Wolverine number 9, Benjamin Percy and Adam Kubert. Just another fantastic entry. Benjamin Percy continues to write Wolverine as well as anyone ever has, in my opinion. So,
yep, I second that. My short stack, read from Dynamite Publishing, read Sonya number 23. So we're one issue away from Mark Russell wrapping up his run. The illustrator on this was Alessandro Miracolo. Yeah, unfortunately, fortunately, it is wrapping up, and we're getting to the conclusion of this run, which I've really enjoyed. So, there's like 2 or 3 other Red Sonja stories going on right now, Dynamite, and I'm not reading any of them because they're doing what they normally do. I also read from Marvel Daredevil number 26. So yeah, I really like this this part of the book where he was in the prison and what's going on with that. And then I don't know, Venom, but not Venom, but Venom showed up, and then I'm like, oh, okay, so we're doing this now. Okay, so this is going to literally infect every book that I'm reading, I guess. Luckily, Venom, not Venom, Venom didn't show up in Wolverine number 9 this week, so that wasn't there to take me out of it. But I'm sure he'll shoehorn his way into that too to deal with that. And then thirdly, on my short stack, also from Marvel, I picked up a classic this week, going all the way back to 1990. What if Wolverine battled Conan the Barbarian? And so, yeah, Wolverine gets transported to Hyboria and runs afoul Conan the Barbarian. Does so by first running afoul, to my great surprise and delight, Red Sonja. Defeats Red Sonja in single combat. So we all know what that means. And then he and Conan get into fisticuffs over some miscommunication. And Red Sonja. This was fun to read. It really was. The art on it, I'm unfamiliar with the artist on this book, but the writer was Glenn Herdling. Penciler is Gary Quippets. I'm not familiar with either one of those.
I thought you said Whip-Ass for a second.
Yeah, no. The art was good, but he made some interesting choices. Some I liked, some I was like, what? But anyway, yeah, so that was fun to go back and read that classic.
Very cool. I like how you got a 4th book in there.
How so?
Red Sonja, Daredevil, Wolverine, and Wolverine versus Conan.
No, his was Wolverine versus Conan.
I did mention, I was piggybacking Craig's mention of Wolverine number 9.
Totally playing.
Yeah, what are you, a cop?
I mean,
says the guy that calls everybody when they stretch it.
We're living in the past.
Yeah, Matt slathered himself down with Crisco this morning. He's slick.
Mm-hmm.
If you say King in Black backwards, it just says Donnie Cates won't stop. Like it's how the devil speaks to us.
That's how I read it front ways too.
If and that event's getting a whole lot of traction. A lot of people are digging it, and I'm like,
I'm reading the main series. I don't dislike it. It's different. I think he's doing interesting things. I'm not invested in the story overall. But interestingly enough, on that note, Ryan Stegman was on Twitter either this week or late last week and just saying, hey, Venom number 200, I guess is what it is. That's our last foray with the character. That's it. We're not doing Venom anymore. And the Twitterverse lost its fucking, like, they were getting like cussed out for like having the audacity to end a run. It was stupid. It's why I hate that portion of the world. But anyway, I read, this is where the variety hour comes in. I read some stuff that's kind of wholly different than the things that you guys read. I went back and I read volume 3 of a series called Heartstopper by Alice Osman. And the reason I read this, because if you are floating around in the nerd news or something, you would have noticed that Heartstopper is actually going to be developed into a animated series on Netflix. So I was like, oh, dude, that's awesome. I love that series. I've read it since the beginning. It's great. This is going to be cool. So let me go revisit that, because I think the 4th trade is getting ready, or the 4th volume is getting ready to drop. And if you follow this, it's about 2 teenage guys, teenage high school boys, Nick and Charlie. They end up realizing that they like one another in more ways than just friendship. And it's just kind of this budding young adults dating relationship between two dudes, two gay guys. It's not over sexualized. It's kind of an all ages story that deals with, you know, what it's like to learn that maybe you like somebody different than everybody else does, or in a different way than everybody else does, but you should still get to date and figure out the ins and out of what that is. It's a great series. I recommend it. Like I said, if you, I'd give this to, you know, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old read. There's nothing sexual about it. It's just a fun little kind of all ages little romance story between two guys. It's freaking awesome, and I can't wait to see what they do with it on the Netflix series. In the middle, Gladly is a series that I think is probably the best thing since sliced bread right now, and that is Philadelphia, number 12. Got to read it. This is Rodney Barnes, Jason Sean Alexander, Bill Sienkiewicz doing the inks, which is kind of cool. He put his hand in it, and again, this is just vampires, antebellum vampires connected to to the long and storied history of how America is really just a horror story. So I really love it. Also, Abigail Adams is a fucking monster. So, you know, if you never thought you would hear that sentence in your life, now you have. And then last but certainly not least, a new series that came out, I think 2 weeks ago. It is by a cartoonist that I have long liked. His stuff's a little bit weird. His stories are definitely not for everybody. But that's Mr. Brandon Graham, and his new, I think it's a 4-part series called Rain Like Hammers, came out, the first issue of it. And it's really good. It's, if you're familiar with Brandon's work, it's quirky and odd and layered, just like a lot of his stuff is. This one takes place in this little high-tech space society where I want to say his name is Eugene, is the main character, and he is just kind of living an arguably boring life on this space station. You know, he gets up, he does his job, it deals with the high-tech stuff, but he's got a secret. He's actually trying to do some espionage in the most, you know, just kind of what would life be like in a world that you and I sitting at home thinks is sci-fi city, you know, just completely filled with all kinds of weirdness, but for him it's normal life. And so yeah, no, I love what Brandon does. This book was fun. He doesn't sugarcoat or hold your hand as you work your way through it. There are some things in there that you're not going to catch on to till the end, that, you know, he doesn't need to explain everything. He just kind of drops you in the deep end, and I like it a lot. So check out Rain Like Hammers. It's good stuff. Or don't. I can't tell you what to do. I'm not your real dad. How to live your life.
Maybe you should tell us what to do.
No, I mean, I will in about 2 years, but that's only after you pay me a retainer. So I become the legal counsel for everybody, all the nerds in Arkansas. Well, all right. What is today's date? What is today?
January 31st.
It is
2021.
January 31st, and that means that this is the last Sunday of the month. Am I right?
Yeah. By advanced mathematics, I can come to that conclusion.
All right, pop quiz, and I'm throwing this over to Matt. Matt, what happens on the last Sunday of every month?
Well, typically it's been chaos, but today's a swerve. It's a swerve, bro.
It is. Well, it's controlled chaos. It's
which is not chaos.
It's a little bit. Well, it can be.
No.
You see that right there? See what happens there? That long pause. That's what's happened. That's what controlled chaos is not. Just chaos. No. So yeah, normally we at the end of the month we kind of throw the script out the window. We just pick a rando topic and spend a little bit talking about it. And we decided to do that a little bit to a point this week. We did throw the script out the window. We're doing something that we don't normally do, but with the nature of what this is, we needed a little bit of heads up in time. So it's not exactly chaos, but for you listening at home, it's going to seem like something that, you know, we don't do all the time. So the chaos is still there for you guys, and that's fun. So I don't know if you
I don't
all
know that that's how chaos works.
Yeah, I
but-
don't think.
Look,
Yeah, this is like the loosest. This is the loosest tie-in ever.
just let me have my moment. Just give it to me. I need, this is the kind of chaos I need in my life. It's like bowling with bumpers. I can't chaos. It's like that, it's just I can't handle the truth, and it, Jack was right. I can't. So just let me have it.
Look it up, kids.
Yeah, right. Oh, does that mean we're am I an old now? Now that's
yes.
a nostalgic
Okay, boomer.
reference?
Yeah.
Oh. I'm gonna go take my fiber pills and take a nap at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God.
Life we live. Okay, so I don't know if you all remember that, but surely some of these folks
I feel attacked.
who listen to our podcast do. A few weeks ago, it was in our, I want to say it was in our best of 2020 episode, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to that, what are you doing with your life? Go fix that. But we got to talking with Matt, and Matt was saying that one of the things that he has really enjoyed in doing the show was when we did a deep dive. Like, we got together, we all read, we read some Frank Miller, and we just spent like 45 minutes to an hour discussing it. And he was like, I think we should pick a book and we should do that again. And damn it, he was right. When he's right, he's right. He's a smart man. So we got together and we said, hey, what thing is classic that we all love, we haven't read in a while, but is constantly just in the zeitgeist of comics? And I don't know about you guys, but when I think of something like that, I tend to think of, at least this time, I thought of Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. And I had just recently bought one of the bigger omnibuses that just got printed, so it was kind of fresh on my mind. But I don't think that the three of us have ever actually discussed this book, either on the show or outside of the show. I just genuinely don't think that we've had a conversation about this book together. So we got to fix that, right? So that's what we are about the business of today. Is we're going to sit down with the first quote unquote trade, the first 8 issues of Alan Moore and Steve Bissette's little journey they went on called Saga of the Swamp Thing. You cool with that?
Word.
See, if I say y'all,
we better be cool with it, because that's what we all practiced and studied this week. So.
Well, see, if I say are y'all cool with that, it makes it sound like it's fresh off the top of my head, which makes it gives the illusion of chaos. Really want. See how that? It's like magic.
No one believes you.
Yeah, man. Thin, bro. Thin.
See, but they would have if y'all hadn't have just ripped the curtain out from under me.
Nobody's buying it, Caleb.
I'm not a good salesman. See, that's your job. It's your job, Matt. So I have a question for you guys before we get into what is seriously just one of the, I think, most respected starts to an ongoing or to an already ongoing series. It's definitely a bullet point in the great life of Alan Moore and his writing. I'm curious about y'all's experience with this historically. So I was having this conversation with Matthew Dykes, who is kind of our proprietor of our local comic shop, Capel Comics, over in Sherwood. And he was like, no, dude, I actually have that dude has every single original first printing issue of this. He was like, I love that series when it was coming out. So did you guys pick this up off the shelf, or what's your origin story with Swamp Thing by Alan Moore?
I read the Saga of the Swamp Thing book 1 hardback form this week for the first time.
Oh, you're newbie.
Yeah,
Nice.
I had started it previously and got sidetracked and never got back to it, so I started over on it this time. But I do have the entire collection of the hardbacks from, I think, 2009. So, yeah, I'm planning on completing the journey.
What about you?
So
Matt?
Whenever this book was current, I was reading comics. I was not reading any DC comics whatsoever. I was a full-on 100% Marvel kid. So this was not on my radar. It would have been useless if it would have been, because I'd have been so young. It would not have. It wouldn't have appealed to me. During the 90s, when Alan Moore really got on my radar, this series I was aware of. And I went back and looked at it, and I was a teenager full on in 90s comics mode. So looking at the artwork in the book, I'm like, what the fuck? It was like not for, I was like, no, thank you. It just, and it wasn't that it's not that I saw it as poor artwork. I saw it as like repulsive and like, ugh, this is just gross. I was like, no, thanks. So I was reading Spawn and all that other hot garbage that was going on at the minute and totally buying into it. So this was just not for me at the time, frankly, because I was immature. So I went back and read this series, I don't know, gosh, 5-ish years ago or something like that. And I've read bits and pieces of Alan Moore's run throughout the years. But going back and reading this straight through is the first time I've done that in a long, long time. And I'd forgotten so much of it.
Right. Well, so for me, when this series was first coming out, I wasn't alive yet. So there's that. Starters.
Excuses.
I wouldn't discover America for another 3 years. So I feel robbed of the opportunity to get this fresh off the shelf by, the timeline. But no, so I read this series for the first time probably around 2008. I was in college. Broke kid trying to get through, doing a whole bunch of stupid stuff. And if you know my backstory, you know that 2008 is also when I did not finish college and left and went and started other things. But trying to figure it out. I was not ready for this at the time. I did not understand what it was. Kind of like Matt was saying, I was not in a place where I could respect it for what it was. I didn't understand the mechanics of the story. I didn't realize that what they were doing were kind of novel things that had not been seen before, and at least not in mainstream comics, and how they, like Alan Moore in particular, was really transforming the way that people read sequential art. To that also, at that time, if you had said the name Len Wein or Bernie Wrightson, probably couldn't have told you who they were. Being young, stupid, more interested in, chasing tail and having college parties and stuff. So I'm glad actually that I have not read this since then. And this is the first time in over a decade that I've read this story this week. And kind of happy I waited to go back and reread it, because there are things in here that I think I appreciate now as a more studied reader of comics, as an older person who can take my time with the page. That was great. And I don't know what version you guys have, but I actually picked up, there's a new collection, and I splurged a little bit this past year during the pandemic at the end of it, just because, why not? But I read this in the form, it's The Absolute Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. I've got volumes 1 and 2. These are big, thick, hefty hardcovers that they're actually, they're produced by DC Black Label. And they're kind of brand new. They come with a really, really great, like hard, you can hear that thing, slip cover. But the book itself, once you take it out, it's oversized. It's bigger than your standard comic, and it's covered in felt. So the cover has got this really dark green felt with these gorgeous, just up close profiles of the Swamp Thing's face. It's a really, really cool trade dress. Like, I really like the way this thing is produced and put out.
Are the pages glossy?
They're semi-gloss. I won't say that they're super glossy. Like when you, like the first page, hyper glossy, but when you get into the story, they mute it down a little bit, so it's not nearly as reflective. So yeah, semi-gloss. I know where you're going with this. I would have loved it to be matte as hell. I think it would look better in that way, but it's not bad. It didn't take me away from it. They did a good enough job updating everything and printing it that it's like you're not getting a whole lot of glare from it. So it's nitpicky things, but yeah.
So that's a yes. That was like the longest yes ever. So mine, I just bought the cheapest book one I could find, and the pages on this are just one step above newsprint. It's very rough paper, which I really appreciate because it gets me about as close as I can get to what the original looked like on newsprint, without going back and reading the original issues. And with the coloring and the artwork, the overall artwork altogether with this series, I think this is a perfect example of the dramatic difference in the delivery of the material based on paper, because glossy is going to completely change the feel of this book to me.
I can see that.
As I said, I have the 2009 version, the complete set of the hardbacks. I think there's 8 volumes in it. Book 1 has a foreword by Len Wein.
Yeah.
And it is a probably similar to what Matt said, a step above newspaper print. Very matte print. The one thing I wish they would have done is some of the lettering is done on black backgrounds, and it's very hard to read. In most places, in this particular printing I have, I wish they would have fixed some of that lettering, but I'm sure it's what it looked like in the original printing as well. So,
yeah, it may have, that original newsprint, a lot of bleeding goes on. So, going back and look at those originals, it very well, man. Yeah, I could see that easily. I mean, because I remember reading newsprint comics back in the day, buying them off the spinner rack, and every once in a while you would get one and the lettering would be so bled, you'd like, what the you just couldn't hardly read it. Didn't happen very often, but it happened.
Well, in some of these pages you have this white lettering on black backgrounds where it's actually lettered on the artwork itself, kind of. Instead of in a thought bubble or whatever, and those got to be tedious to read at some points, but again, being nitpicky.
That's interesting. I mean, although, because I know he's referring to what, I don't have any trouble reading that on my particular issue.
Well, I'm 15 years older than you two, so my eyesight is fading.
Then, something else to consider is that the print, Craig's version may be just fine. It's just his eyes suck. Could very well be the case.
Well, see, this is where I want Craig to have the oversized version that I have, because the letters are bigger. It's like that large keypad phone that you got, Grandma.
The Cricket phone.
Yeah,
or the cricket, or the grasshopper, or whatever that thing is. Those double-sized buttons.
Each number is the size of a baby's hand. just for your convenience. So, Craig, you said yours had a foreword by Len Wein. Mine doesn't have that, and I'm hella jelly. But what mine has is an afterword by Stephen Bissette. So,
nice.
Yeah, that's what I like about these different versions, is because you get you get different back matter for each, or format, or just matter period for each different copies, and so it's great to see over time what they've shifted and put into these. So. Well, we want to talk about it, or just go home? What do we do?
Yeah, let's call it a day.
Okay, hang it up.
Good show, guys.
Greg's tired. Show's over.
Greg is tired, but show is not over.
The first issue, so Alan Moore's premiere on the saga of the Swamp Thing. It's issue number 20 that came out in January of 1984. It was, in case you are, you're worried if you can read this or not, it was approved by the Comics Code Authority. So thankfully, we know we're not getting, anything that's going to corrupt our ethics or morals, or, really wash away from the true respectability of being an American citizen.
That had to be a chore for Alan Moore to write within the Code of Comics.
No, like, knowing what I know of Alan Moore, I bet he saw that more of a challenge. Like, there's one scene in here that's like in this story, actually, that's 1000% just a joke about masturbation. And so, like, knowing him, he thought about that as a challenge.
There's no doubt that he wanted to see how far he could push the limits.
Oh, absolutely. And you know how much this would have cost you if you had bought it fresh off the shelf?
99 cents, probably $1.29.
75 cents.
75. Yeah. Okay.
3 whole quarters it would have cost you for this. And So his first book, he joined by the great Mr. Steve Bissette, who is helping. Oh no, sorry, excuse me. First issue is Dan Day, Mr. Dan Day, colored by Steve Olaf, lettered by John Costanza, inks by John Totleben. This was edited. It is Swamp Thing is Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson's baby. Len Wein stayed along to help edit this, but he had a little help with that. And the little help came from somebody who I don't know at this time was a household name, but certainly is now if you're a comics person. But it was Karen Berger, the person who, the woman who is, I won't say solely responsible, but like heavy-handedly responsible for making Vertigo a thing. And you can see her doing that with these. She was able to connect a lot of these British, Western European writers with DC and get them coming through. And so it's, you can see her thumbprint on this.
No, she did not have anything to do with this. This is totally Len Wein's doing.
You sure?
Absolutely. Yeah. He had just read Miracle Man and went to Jeanette Kahn, who was the publisher at the time, and said, "Hey, I want to get this guy to write Swamp Thing." She signed off on it. He called Alan Moore, said, "Hey, I'm Len Wein," and Alan Moore hung up on him. Thought it was a prank.
So Karen Berger's listed in mine. Karen Berger's listed as an editor on the original ongoing series in mine.
Yeah, Len Wein's. That's the story that he tells.
Okay,
that's how we got Alan Moore on this.
Well, I'm curious, and I want to dig into that because there's got to be something there. Because, like I said, she's listed in both of my copies as an editor, and she may have jumped in later on that. But I mean, Karen Berger is famous for connecting a lot of those British writers who were over there kicking ass on 2000 AD stuff, wrapping them into the DC world. So, that's interesting. I'm curious. I need to put my little historian hat on. Regardless, nonetheless, this book starts off. It's called Loose Ends, which is a fitting title because what Alan Moore is doing here is he's going through and wrapping up all the former storylines before he really changes the character forever. Just is going to do something way different than anything I think the creators of the character had in mind. If you've been reading this series up to that, you know that Swamp Thing was kind of at odds with a guy who was supposed to be his arch nemesis, which is Arcane. He just defeated Arcane. Arcane is officially dead. He crashed his giant spaceship. He's lost in a swamp. Alan Moore walks you through and he introduces you to a lot of the people who are going to be kind of key players in the ongoing story. The Tremaines are in here. Abigail is listed in here. They're looking for the quote unquote Swamp Thing, trying to figure out where he is, where he went, at least his human form, as you walk through this. And Swamp Thing kind of comes to after this, and he's not sure what's going on. He is trying to really find his place. And of course, at this time, he's looking for a way that he can turn back into a human. He doesn't want to stay in this form. While all this is kind of happening, while he's going through and exploring and kind of setting the stage, there is a military force, or at least they look like a military force. They are coming into the area where Arcane's ship has crashed. They're setting up a base there, and they're also looking for Swamp Thing. They've got nefarious plans. They've got reasons they need to find him. And they're going to tell the locals that, it was a UFO crashing. We're going to get out of here. Abigail and her husband, as you are reintroduced to them, you realize that they're having a little bit of a rocky marriage. Her husband is dealing with alcoholism. He's, constantly competing between drinking himself to death and presenting himself as a force, or at least as he needs Abigail to tell him that he's a significant part of her life. And I don't know that he ever gets that from her. And so of course he continues to turn around and turn to the bottle. And there's that one page that I was talking about where he's sitting there and he manifests a blue woman in the palm of his hand and sits back in his recliner, leans back, takes a shot. And it's totally a joke about masturbation. He's got pissed at his wife. He's not getting no loving. So he's going to rub one out in front of the TV real quick. So but I mentioned the Tremaines earlier, right? And they're part of this group that's looking for the Swamp Thing. And there's been a sabotage here. There's been industrial sabotage. We all know Swamp Thing's history. He was a scientist. He was working on top secret government things, and he got killed for it. They blew him and his wife up. And so the Tremaines are looking for him. They are also caught into an explosion. And really what you get by the end of the story is Swamp Thing coming to a head with these military forces, and he draws the short stick. Alan Moore uses the analogy of ants. Like, no matter what Swamp Thing does, he can't jump ahead of. He's outnumbered. They swarm him. They unleash all hell, pump him full of lead, and he is left assumedly dead, riddled with bullets, and taken into custody by this military force. And in that single issue, Alan Moore both opens the door for where he's wanting to go, and does something really neat in closing what Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson had created, just turning that down a little bit, not discounting it. It doesn't ship it out of continuity. It just takes it and it ties it up and it leaves it, and really launches the story at this point into a 180-degree change. Just goes a complete opposite direction. And I thought it was cool. I thought this was really, really great. And I'm not the world's biggest Swamp Thing fan, but just seeing how Alan Moore and Dan Day stepped in here. And can you imagine being Dan Day and following Bernie Wrightson on anything? Like, no, like,
no, thank you.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
No. What else you got? I'm not going to be the dude who follows Bernie Wrightson. But I thought this was a really well crafted seed change, pun intended, for the character.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Matt. They do a very good job with a shift in tone and starting as you put it, a change of scenery, basically, and a change of direction of the character.
Well, what's cool is the fact that Len Wein, being the co-creator of the character, mm-hmm. and the editor at the time, was totally on board with Alan Moore changing basically the foundation of the character. That's really cool, because he very easily, as the editor, could have tried to discourage that or nixed it all together. But he's like, absolutely. Something else that's really interesting is this never would have happened if John Carpenter hadn't made the Swamp Thing movie. That's the impetus for Alan Moore getting this job.
Okay.
Whenever the movie was announced, Len Wein was like, well, we need to reinvigorate the series, since there's going to be a new attention to the character via the movie. And that's the impetus for this even happening at all.
Wow. Yeah, I was unaware of that.
Yeah.
Well, and it's great too, and it shows a real level of trust and faith in what Alan Moore does, because Alan Moore was not unheard of at this point, but this is 1984, so this is pre-Watchmen. I don't know if he had done I forget what year the Superman, what do you get for the man who has everything, book came out, but Alan Moore was not all caps letters giant thought bubble marquee.
This was his first DC work.
Yeah. So, and to have that level of faith in somebody who's just coming in, just dipping their toe, that says a lot about Alan. I mean, it says a lot about Len Wein, but it also says a lot about Alan Moore to come in and really set the stage and to be able to pitch it. Because were this less of a pitch, I don't see this happening. We're somebody else who came in with who were unconvincing that they could craft this in that way. I don't see Len Wein or anybody really giving the reins over. So, to be a fly on that wall. I mean, that's like you think of the other side of that though. That's like, can you imagine going to Len Wein, like the Len Wein, who was Len Wein at this time, like he was the marquee name, and just being like, hey, love what you did, but I'm gonna change everything. Here's why. Like, talking about sweating bullets.
I would guess Alan Moore was not sweating bullets when he went to Len Wein with that. He was a space cadet. I mean, yeah, seriously, that he was nervous about it.
You're right. You can't attribute
I'm sure.
common man
Yeah,
things to Alan Moore.
I'm sure his thought process was, you came to me to write a story, and I'm going to write my story. And here's what the story's going to be. Take it or leave it.
I'm pretty sure as he left that office, Alan Moore's thought process was, the spell worked.
Quite possibly.
That
Quite
sacrifice
possibly.
was worth it.
You mentioned following Bernie Wrightson. I did want to make sure and mention that Dan Day's artwork is badass, though.
Yeah.
100%.
It's freaking great.
It really was.
Well, and it works. I mean, so it is by no means is it Bernie Wrightson. Like, it would be silly to say that, and it doesn't have to be. Number one, it doesn't need to be, but it fits in well with Wrightson's style. Like if my copy of this does not have the issue that preceded this. My copy doesn't have any Bernie Wrightson work, other than I think maybe a pinup or somewhere in it. But if you hold this up to Bernie Wrightson, you can see the influence there. You can see the same school coming in to this really like the old school EC horror comics vibe. Like he kept that, and I think that was smart. I think that really helped as far as the fluidity from one set of creators to the other goes. I think you have that enough of an anchor that really latches on to what preceded it. And I'm curious with you guys, one thing that really struck me, and I didn't notice this the first time I read it, and I noticed it more so after I got to the second and third issues, and this wasn't there, but the symmetry of the first book was really striking to me. As you're flipping the book, the pages are almost all mirror images of one another in some sense. You get these pages that are like bookended on one set by these eagles in the corner. There are the pages where it's dealing with the Tremaines, like up in the corner, there's these little like stone tiki mahjong looking symbols. There's the pages where the Marines or whoever they are setting up shop. At the top of it, there's whiskey bottles pouring on each side of it. I was really struck with the symmetry of this book. And I'm not sure why. Like, I'm not sure what, other than making the pages look pretty, if that is supposed to be something that, is in Alan Moore's and in Day's mind is reflective. Like they're saying, like, look, this is going to mirror what you saw before, but not completely. But at some point, like in the second issue, they kind of give that up. They don't carry that on.
It's a different artist.
Right. And so that makes me wonder if knowing, I've read some of Alan Moore's scripts, and Alan Moore, when he's doing weird stuff with pages, he'll write out what he wants. Like he would write that stuff out. So I don't know if that was something that Alan Moore called for or that Day called for, but it really, really popped off the page, and it made that first series really striking, or that first issue of the series. Another important craft note to me that really shows off what Alan Moore, like the connection that he and Day had, was the scene right before they, quote unquote, kill Swamp Thing. As they're zoning him into the scope, you see, what are those things called? They're little balls on a string, and they tap one side and the other. They show how the entropy and the momentum keep working.
I think they're called desk balls.
Desk balls. That tracks. You can hear that as this book, like once you see it, I don't know about you guys, I can't help but hear the cadence that creates as I'm going through here and reading these panels. And that, again, I don't know whose idea that was. I've seen Alan Moore do things like that in other scripts, so I think it was probably his. But just that element alone, that introduces you to a sense that is not on the page. Like that really grabs at least me, and it makes it almost a 3 or 4 dimensional reading experience, because now in my head, I can there's an audible element to this book that, again, it's imaginative because you have to do it in your own brain. But, that's something different than you see than just having sound effects like, boom, bang, pow. They put those in pages of comics all the time, but when you add the
They haven't done that since the 50s.
oh bullshit,
Boom,
they
bang,
do that.
pow.
You're not reading enough Daniel Warren Johnson because he does that shit all the time.
Yeah, I'm not reading that.
I
That's
mean,
true.
you get snicked and stuff like that, right?
Right. Trying to act like it's old.
Bang, boom, pow.
I mean, I get what you're saying completely. Maybe I'm an oddball because I tend to hear comics in my head when I'm reading them, anyways.
Well, that's
Kind
the
of like
point.
if
I mean,
if I read prose, I see the pictures in my head. So, I might be the oddball out on that. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it was a very, very good effect, though,
Right.
and very well done.
I thought it set the cadence to the really, really good craft work way of setting the cadence to the story. And it's almost like that looming sound, just like tick, 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 tick. Like it adds a creep factor to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. But this issue is very well crafted from beginning to end, and
Oh,
that
100%.
it's a very good transition issue that, as you stated, it wraps up everything while building the story that he's going to tell, at least for the next 5 issues.
Well, speaking of the next issue, we roll in to the next issue. Now, this, as Matt mentioned, this story has a different artist on it, and this is where we first see Steve Bissette, and he's got Rick Veitch joining him with inks by John Totleben, cover art by Thomas Yates on the original series, and this is called The Anatomy Lesson, and this is where Moore really starts to change things. Up until this point, there was a little bit of a Hulk element, maybe a transformative monster story. Swamp Thing was Alec Holland. Like he Alec Holland's body went into the swamp. Swamp Thing emerged. That's just him. He's been transformed. This is where you really start to see Alan Moore just change the character, like broke him down, made him malleable, warp Alec Holland, kind of erase Alec Holland in a way. This is the issue where Swamp Thing, they think he's dead. You first see it, he opens up and it's Swamp Thing's gray husk of a body in a cooler in like this cryo chamber. He's been captured. He's been taken back to a lab. The powers that be, so to speak, are, they see an aberration, they want to kill it and then study it to find out what it was. And these are also the folks that killed him in the first place. They wanted his formula. This kind of plant animal bridge that he was working on, and they think it worked for him, but they're not sure why it didn't work for his wife, who, she had helped him. She was also a scientist. They've gone and they've dug up her body, but even though she was permeated by I don't know if you'd call it radiation or what, that resulted in the change in Alec Holland, they're not finding it with her. It's just, she's just rotted. It's just residual chemicals at that point that didn't have an effect on her. But there's something about one of these scientists that this man that they brought in to help study the corpse of Swamp Thing. He's not a man. He is a figure that we have seen before. I don't know if he was a figure that was invented. I'd need to go back and do some research. I don't know if he was invented for Swamp Thing or if he, existed long past that, but it's the Floronic Man.
No, he was a D-list Justice League villain.
Oh, okay. Do you see? This is one of those things where I need to be quicker with pulling up the wiki, because I think he was made in the 60s, maybe. I looked him up just to find out what a little bit of a story was, but didn't write down any of the dates. But he's been captured, right? Like he's not doing this of his own free will. He's basically being held hostage. I mean, they're paying him, but he's at odds with these folks. But he's doing it because he wants to study Swamp Thing. He's finally found another creature that is connected to plant life in the same way the same way that he is, and arguably not to the extent that characters like Poison Ivy would come to be. But he needs to. He feels alone. He feels ostracized. Obviously, whatever has made him the Floronic Man has warped him. And as he's sitting there, he's working. He's doing an autopsy. He's pulling out things that are shaped like lungs but aren't lungs. He's seeing like these internal organs that mimic human anatomy but have no function. They don't function like human anatomy was. And he's trying to figure out what's going on when it dawns on him through the genius of Alan Moore really working this into the story. He's seen this before, but in different creatures. What these planarian worms that have been studied have the ability to absorb knowledge and information from other dead planarian worms, from things that there's this whole concept of absorbing knowledge, of absorbing a being that comes into play here. And what Alan Moore does is he completely flips the script. This is not Alec Holland. This is the ghost in the shell. This is the plant.
I disagree.
Life. What do you mean?
I disagree that it's not. I think what he's doing is asking the question of what makes you human. Because Alec Holland's consciousness is still in the Swamp Thing.
Yeah, let me rephrase, because I don't disagree with what you're saying. This is not Alec Holland's body. So what has not happened here? This idea they're changing it from the outline or the idea of like a Hulk-esque character where his body was radiated and it changed and he can ever turn.
Right.
This isn't his.
Okay.
This is the mind of Alec Holland. This is the brain of Alec Holland to some extent.
Well, it's not his brain; it's his consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been absorbed into the plant life that the radiation that his body absorbed, that his meat sac absorbed when he sank into the swamp.
And I only wanted to disagree there because I think it's the main point of the story.
Yeah.
It is what constitutes humanity.
Yeah, no, facts. No,
okay.
I'm not saying that that's not what it is.
Okay.
So
continue on. I'll shut up.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it's this the plants around him created this thing. So it's not the body of Alec Holland. And what this does is this journey that he's been on to reverse the symptoms, it ends that. It completely takes that away from him and it breaks him. It completely shatters the psyche of this character, of this figure, because he knows that there's no going back to humanity. He's stuck looking like this. And yes, it does beg the question, especially when you start to later on in the series, like uncover some more of the character aspects, like what is humanity? What makes people, what makes them tick? Is it the body that they're born into, or is it, the chemical reaction in their brain? And we know what the answer to that is, right? Like, and especially now when we've studied these things more, but at the time that was a big question, right? Like, and there's analogs to to transgendered individuals, changing their bodies to map what's in their head. So there are these things that Alan Moore is thinking about at this time that in 1984, at least in, everyday average American circles, people weren't necessarily discussing these things. These were things that were kept quiet. And so he's really doing something in this moment that is going to, it's almost it's the magic of Alan Moore, right? It's his way of foreshadowing and thinking about these really abstract things at the time that would go on to be major issues in the future. And we see that again towards the end of this arc, with the aspect of eco-terrorism and what we would come to know as global warming and the greenhouse gases. But he's doing that here. And so as the Floronic Man is, he's doing these experiments and he's starting to figure out that this is not a human body, that this is the consciousness, the everything that made this person is absorbed into these plants, and there's no going back. And he's writing all this down in a journal. Well, once he gets it figured out, the again, air quotes, the powers at be don't need him anymore. They kick him to the curb, they fire him. But this is the Floronic Man we're talking about. You don't just do that and get to walk away with it. So he sabotages the lab. He knows that Swamp Thing is inevitably gonna wake up, and I think he understands that that's going to happen sooner or later. He changes some passcodes. He leaves the file where it's going to be conveniently found. To a point, he doesn't know how quick this is going to happen, but he has a feeling. And so what inevitably takes place is Swamp Thing wakes up. He reads the file. He understands the secrets. He knows that he will never, ever, ever, ever have the body of Alec Holland back again. That this is who he is. And in a way, and we see this in the next couple of issues. He starts to separate himself from Alec Holland. We see on down the line where figures like Abigail call him Alec, and he says, "Don't call me that. I'm not that person. I'm transformed. I'm something completely different. There are remnants of Alec Holland here, but it's not the same. It's gone." But that doesn't happen till later. At the moment, the Floronic Man is kind of putting himself into a different game. He sees himself as somebody who's taking the next step. He's going to tap in to forces that he is not completely aware of, or at least he doesn't have a good grasp on, but he doesn't care. His need for, I don't know if you would call it revenge or vengeance or power or what, but it is just starting to take place. And it relies on the Swamp Thing and studying the Swamp Thing. And he has plans of going back and getting him. But of course, as we know, the Swamp Thing leaves. But he's being watched, like he's being monitored. As the Swamp Thing goes back to the swamp, he breaks down, and you really see this in issue 3 of the series. Or I say issue 3, it's issue 22. He's returned to the swamp and literally set down taproots. He's became immobile. He's sunken into his own head. And he's being observed by the Floronic Man. But Abigail and Dan find him. And they're starting to freak out and worry and try to figure out a way to make him come back. The Floronic Man has got this spray that it's basically spray on skin, and so he's able to disguise himself. So he does, and he walks up to Abigail and her husband, and he kind of he lies. There's no kind of to it. Says that, hey, he's sitting there studying him. He wants to help him and get him out of the swamp, but he's trying to explain to Abigail what's going on with with the Swamp Man's physical body and being really sunken in to the environment. While this is happening, Swamp Thing is in his own head. He's seeing these really hallucinogenic images, these dreams of life outside, or his memories and how it's being usurped by the fact that he is the Swamp Thing. Literally, there's a scene in here where it's him, and he's got to wade through a swamp, and whoever he's with is like, "Oh, you can't do that in those clothes. Put this on." And he hands him a jumpsuit, except it's not a jumpsuit; it's the Swamp Thing. And you really start to see this the culmination of some of what the Floronic Man had figured out with these planarian worms, as he's having this psychological break in his own head, and he's just being devoured, so to speak, leaving nothing but his. Again, this is all a metaphor because it's in his brain, but it's in his skeleton. And he's got to go bury that. So it's is it metaphor? Is it a foreshadowing of something that's to come? Yes and yes to both of those questions. But at least in this sense, he is in his own mind burying Alec Holt, his former self. He's accepting the fact that he is never going to be that, and he's fully embracing this new figure that he's become. Does that make sense? Am I reading into that too much, or what do you guys think about that?
So I want to go back.
Go ahead. Go. Yeah.
So starting from the beginning, I want to go back and talk about Stephen Bissette's pencil work.
Uh-huh.
So all the reasons that I said this series turned me off when I first looked at it as a teenager are what is so appealing about it to me. The very rough, asymmetrical, organic look of this book could not deliver this better to me. This has got everything illustrated in this is so organic looking, is the only way I know how to say it. And when you're talking about a swamp creature, something from the bog, which is a gross place, frankly, everything feels like just really gross in this book, as it should be. There are very few good characters in this story. I mean, you got people talking in an office and it's like, oh God, these are repulsive people. I mean, so the artwork in this book, you'd be very, very hard to deliver the feeling of this story any better than Bissette did in his pencils and his layouts. These guys taking a character like the Floronic Man, which is again a D-list Justice League character, and elevate him to a very, very compelling. Anytime somebody does that, that's real. I really, really appreciate that. You see that occasionally throughout the comic book medium, and I really get a kick out of that when somebody has the ability to take such a character that's on the surface is so lame and you really pull some gravity out of it. So I wanted to make sure.
I'm giving Caleb credit for not bringing up Tom King there and Kite Man.
Yeah, well, it's because he wasn't successful with Kite Man. So that'd be a null point, a moot point. But and again, kind of going back to the whole idea of following one of the creators being Bernie Wrightson, I think Stephen Bissette killed it. And while we're on the subject of Stephen Bissette, did you guys know there's a Stephen Bissette art museum here in the state of Arkansas?
No.
It's at Henderson College in Arkadelphia, of all places.
Okay. Yeah, definite field trip.
Let's all go get our vaccines and jump.
Yeah, I want to second everything Matt just said, because I mean, you literally feel like you're in the swamp with Swamp Thing and the other characters when they're in the swamp. And you can only do that through this wonderful art that is in this book.
Man,
and
so good.
Yeah. I mean, there's pages I would love to own out of these issues, but absolutely just stunningly drawn.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where he's crushing stuff and his eyes are red and you can just feel the emotion behind this monster at this point, and it's so fantastically done.
He just kills it in illustrating every animal. If you look through this and see all the animals that are in the swamp,
I was going to say, the background,
so good, man.
How fleshed out the setting is.
The animals he illustrates are so good. The organic feeling of the swamp. I mean, the little detail he puts into just Swamp Thing himself as a character. It just leaves you. Everything looks slimy and disgusting. It's just, and as you get into the book and you see as you get further into the story where Swamp Thing and Abigail start to, form a relationship, and they're like, being playful in the bog, you're like, God, it's disgusting. This woman is crazy. It's like, why would you hang out in the swamp? Like, just go for a swim. That place is a cesspool. It's like, really paints a picture of, what kind of woman this is.
Well, and one thing I want to talk about a little bit is, I don't know that this is the first time it was done, but this is the first time that I'm aware of that somebody took the monster story and turned it on its head. You have kind of the Jekyll and Hyde stories where you have the human becomes the monster but then comes back. And as we talked about earlier, this is about where is your humanity?
Mm-hmm.
And, so many times the monster's just a monster. He's just but to put this humanity inside of the monster And I mean, Anne Rice did it later with her vampire genre and things like that, but with her vampire stories. But to present the story from the monster's point of view as a human isn't done a whole lot, and I don't know how often before this it had been done.
Well, it's happened. I mean, you could think about Dr. Frankenstein. I think there's some of that to it, which, I mean, and the Hulk did something very similar with that. But I think this is probably closer to Frankenstein. But all of these stories, I think, on some level, are born from the Hebrew legend of the golem, where the rabbinical figures crafted this giant out of clay, and then brought him to life. I think that's the first. I think that's the first place you really see it.
But keeping the humanity within it,
right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about comic books, I can't think of an earlier version of what you're talking about, Craig, than the Thing from the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. I mean, that's another version, but he wasn't necessarily portrayed as a monster, right? Maybe had the looks of a monster, but not portrayed that way.
Well, I thought that was your point. Like, he looks like a monster, but he's holding on to his humanity.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, in that, there's also Krakoa, who was in Fantastic Four number 2 or 4, something like that, who was a living island. There's some of that idea that Jack Kirby brought into the world there too. I mean, Krakoa's since then been changed and is now considered a mutant and that kind of thing, and has taken all kinds of importance in Kirkman's run. But yeah, so you saw that
Hickman's.
Yeah, Hickman. Sorry, one man's as good as another. No, I'm joking. It's definitely Hickman. But no, you saw some of that there with the invention of Krakoa and like I said, the Hulk being some type of figure. I mean, there's
when the Hulk was a monster, he wasn't a man.
Well, he was a man turned into a monster.
But he didn't keep his humanity, or in the early days when he was the monster.
Well, he did when
he was a total villain. I mean, he was. Yeah, I mean,
right, but he was only that when the sun when the sun went down, when the sun was up, and that was always his conscience. So
yeah, but you're missing my point there, in that he retained. Okay.
So overall, like, what were like some of the high points overall in the book for you, Craig?
The art. Are we talking about the entire first?
Yeah, the whole
arc.
The whole collection.
Yeah, so this entire first arc, one thing that really Caleb alluded to it earlier, but the Flora Man, what's his name? Floronic Man. Thank you. His whole plan is extremism, and in order to save the green, you've got to kill everything else. That's his plan, correct? So it's what happens when you take. It's a commentary on extremism. When you go too far with trying to protect things, and Swamp Thing corrects him later and says, no, you have to have the balance in order to do this. So I think there's a commentary in here on extremism as well that I think is important.
Yeah, and very, very clearly illustrates how easily the Swamp Thing could be a villain by having by showing the Floronic Man and his motivation, what he wants to do with the green versus Swamp Thing's version of the green.
That's right. And how the Floronic Man actually manipulated the green as opposed to allowing the green to guide him, which is what the Swamp Thing does. So to me, those 2 points were the highlights: the humanity in the monster, in what defines humanity, and then the commentary on extremism, as well as just absolutely beautiful and stunning art.
Yeah, whenever he confronts the Floronic Man and tells him that he is hurting the green, it's really interesting, the Floronic Man's response, and he's confronted with his own hypocrisy. That and his response to being confronted with his own hypocrisy was really good. Oh man, it was really good.
In today's world, I find that response to be a stretch, but hey.
Most
people don't respond well to their own hypocrisy.
Well, you're talking about the Floronic man. He's not a human. He's not totally human either. So, you know,
I did love the scene that takes place in the Justice League headquarters where they're discussing what to do with him, and they don't know what to do because they've never confronted him at this level before. And he's always, as Matt said, been a D-lister. So it was kind of them going, well, we'll just throw our hands up and see what happens. You know, he's the Floronic man is too tough for Superman.
It's interesting that Batman wasn't included in that scene.
I agree.
There's definitely something to be said about that, especially since Batman shows up later on in Alan Moore's run and has a fantastic interaction with Swamp Thing. Have y'all read that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's
I
amazing.
have not, as I've only read this first volume. So
yeah, whenever the whole because no spoilers, but Swamp Thing goes to Gotham City, and the reason he goes to Gotham City, and his entire interaction there is freaking amazing. I mean, it just kills it. In it's another one of those points where it elevates the character of Swamp Thing and what he's capable of, and just the mind of Alan Moore, the creative mind of Alan Moore, just in this collection is just like, man, it's amazing, the creative mind of this guy. And then as you get further and further into the series, he keeps elevating the character to levels where you're like, the Swamp Thing is the Green. And what that really means, what that really means. They kind of touch on it there with that Justice League scene, and just how extremely dangerous this character could be.
What did they say? Thank God somebody's watching Louisiana.
Yeah.
Well, so that moment right there, that was one of the most striking moments, and I think prescient moments, especially when you consider what's going on in the world today. Is they're having that conversation. They're like, well, we've got people watching New York and Chicago and DC, but who watches Louisiana? Like, who watches these places that aren't heavily populated, they're arguably the forgotten places, and it kind of gives this populist message again, which ties into things like global warming and the politics that surround those kind of things, and the forgotten people in rural America. And I think that there's an important, and this is 1984 that this is being discussed and spoken about. And so that's like, I thought that was again, Alan Moore being way before his time, or at least being able to read into something that was not yet kind of on the zeitgeist's brain. Like these weren't things being lauded into headlines. There's something to be said about Reaganomics and the rise of the American right in that sense, which did deal with a lot of the populist issues, but it wasn't quite there yet. You know what I mean? So he just really lays into it with this. And I love, you're talking about issue 24, Roots, where you get that scene. It's the pages, and I think Rick Veitch did these. I'm not 100% sure, but it's meant to look like the Floronic Man is being broadcasted on TV. Those really fuzzy, you can almost see the static. It almost looks like photorealism though of the Floronic Man. I thought those pages were so badass, and Bissette continually just makes that character. He just degrades him more and more. So much more detail thrown in there, and just how ugly and grotesque he is. I thought they were amazing.
Talking about him, I'm flipping through, and he's picking up his spray, as you called it, that makes him look human. Did you catch what it's called? And that he actually has it packaged?
No,
it's called Flexi Flesh.
Yeah,
and it's in its own spray can.
You have to just wonder who produces that fine product, and what market are they actually?
Yeah, how much is he paying to have that produced into a can that has its name on it? So yeah, outstanding work.
So
Rick Veitch had nothing to do with any of these books, by the way.
What again? I'm going to ask. What do you mean?
You said you don't know if Rick Veitch did issue number 24.
Yeah, because he's credited on it.
So I'm looking at it's not it's the credits I'm looking at for issue 24. It's got Bissette and Totleben for all these issues, except for the one that Day did.
So I wonder if there was some type of remastering going on, because mine, again, my copy for all of these except for from number 21, the anatomy lesson, all the way through Roots. That last one, Rick Veitch is credited with Stephen Bissette on every single one of them.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. See,
It must have been some remastering because
just
trying to
and
find the
Totleben.
credit page on my 24.
Yeah, I'll shoot you guys a picture of it, but no, straight up. And I don't know if this is from, like I said, part of a remastering thing, or if this is later on they found out subsequently that maybe Rick Veitch helped do some of these pages, just to, for time constraints, which happens sometimes in the production of things, right? But yeah, he's absolutely listed in all of those on 5 of the first 6 issues. Sorry, 4 of the first 5 issues.
Wow.
Mine. And as I'm looking through here, it's only on the Stephen Bissette thing. So later on, when you get into like the issue by Shawn McManus or Ron Randall, like he's not on any of those. It's only on the Steve Bissette pages that he's listed. So yeah, that's one of those.
Now he is listed in mine on the front page. It's got written by Alan Moore, art by Stephen Bissette, John Totleben, Dan Day, and Rick Veitch. So he must have come back and did some. Looking at the anatomy lesson, it says pencils by Stephen Bissette and Rich Veitch.
Mm-hmm.
Swamp doesn't have him listed. Another Green World doesn't. So I only have him listed on the 2nd issue.
Huh. Well, check our little text,
which would be
thing
20.
Because I just sent you guys pictures of mine. But
interesting.
So, yeah, that's so weird. So one thing before we move on to,
it had to be some remastering or.
No, go ahead, Craig. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say it had to be remastering or whatever. So
yeah. So before we move on to the second arc, though, like let's jump back and have the conversation, because we were talking about the humanity that kind of got, what is humanity on the swamp thing, because by the end of this issue, I think he's kept the human like morality of things to a point, but I think he's completely left everything that was Alan behind. Do you guys not? Are y'all of different?
Alec?
Opinions? Yeah, Alec. Sorry.
By what issue?
I would say by the end of this issue, I guess that'd be issue 24, where they finally beat the Floronic Man. Oh, by the way, Superman walking him off in a cave was just creepy as hell. But I think by the end of that, I don't know that there's any more Alec Holland left.
I think the whole point is that he is still Alec Holland.
Well, he's retained his he's retained his consciousness. That's where he's getting his sense of morality from, versus the Floronic Man not having any. So he's not total. No, he's never totally left, the consciousness behind. He's letting go of the idea that he'll ever be human again. He's no longer a human being.
Right.
But I don't think he ever leaves behind the concept that who he is as a being is Alec Holland. He struggles with that when he first finds out that he can't regain his form of humanity.
Right.
But I don't think I think it's the humanity, the consciousness of Alec Holland that saves him.
So yeah, so like, and I see that, and like I said, I was of the opinion, and I still am, that he kept the humanity in the sense of the morality, but I think he gives up the self to some extent, like the selfishness of Alec, like every man has, like we all have that, he really does become more of the spokes figure for the green. And I'm not saying that he gets rid of everything that made Alec Holland. I think by this time he's accepted that Swamp Thing is something else, and that he's totally detached from who Alec Holland. But he still has his memories, and he still misses his wife and stuff too, though. So I think that's this ongoing seesaw effect of it.
Well, I think there is a duality to who he is. He's right. Alec Holland, and he is the green. He is the representative of the green. So, I mean, there is a duality to him, but unlike other figures in literary history, he maintains both of those dualities at the same time.
Okay. That makes sense.
In my opinion, it's not a Jekyll and Hyde or Hulk Banner thing where when one becomes the other goes into the background.
Right.
I think he is both the green and Alec Holland at the same time.
Emerges as something that contains both, but is unlike either in a sense.
Well, that final page on issue 24, I think, illustrates all of that.
Right.
This is his new identity.
Right. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. And
the next arc really goes into it with him maintaining his humanity and helping the children.
Mm-hmm.
Man, Jason Blood is written so well in that issue number 25. Oh my gosh, so well.
You're gonna die. I have no need for this card.
Oh, man, that's so amazing.
Well, Matt, I'll let you jump in the driver's seat in that one though. Why don't you lead us through this next arc if you want to?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go page by page, but this one, Jason Blood shows up at this part of in this part of Louisiana because a young foolish couple playing with a Ouija board, as so many stories with bad endings turn out do, let loose a demon. So that gets the attention of Jason Blood, and he shows up to town to take care of said problem. And coincidentally, Abby starts working at a home for autistic children, one of which is a newly orphaned autistic child, the child of the parents who summoned this demon with their Ouija board and were killed as a result. So lesson, kids. But and then
make sure you spell correctly around the white monkey.
Correct. Yeah. That old lesson brought to surface once again.
Right.
So yeah, it was really, that was, frankly, it just felt like a really fun interlude to this arc. Very, very well done.
Well, the end of the arc, it says it's dedicated to Kirby, right? Yeah. So I think it was, it was meant to be an interlude before he got on with the rest of the story. But there are some things that come out of it as far as, obviously going back to the humanity and his willing to help these kids, and it has nothing to do with the green.
Yeah.
Well, so you get introduced to this demon, which, like Craig said, it's the Monkey King, which is this white ape-like figure that just terrorizes all of them. But this is just another example about how there are figures in the DC universe, and they bring out here, and they're like putty in Alan Moore's hands, but they're good guys in the grand scheme of things, but they're not necessarily good guys. And Etrigan the Demon is one of those figures. I mean, the scene towards the end of this arc where him and Swamp Thing just start beating the hell out of each other because they both think they're right. They both think they're doing the right thing, and they're protecting humanity and everybody. But Etrigan's willing to go a bridge too far. Like, that just really, it hits home, right? Like it really makes these figures jump off the page, and on some level it makes them more fun to read because they're not black and white. They're the in between. And who's to say what is the bridge too far when it comes to demons? So and introducing the devil. So I love these Etrigan pages. Like, they are just absolutely, and you do the same work that Bissette did with the Floronic Man. He's not pretty. These pages are ugly. They are offensive and abusive to the eye, and that makes them gorgeous. Like just the way that they're molded, and they show all the warts and all the divots and all the nasty with these figures. And I'm curious. So when I was reading this and they introduced the Monkey King, and the way it looks, especially with the amount of green that's on the page, it reminded me of one of the last arcs of Immortal Hulk, where he fights Xanadu or the big white fluffy looking thing. And I was sitting there. I wonder if they read this before they made that, because so many of those pages just reminded me, or of these pages reminded me of that story.
Well, I kind of guarantee that almost every modern comic writer has read this.
Oh yeah,
story. So how does Bernie Wrightson not influence modern art, comic art? How does Alan Moore's Swamp Thing not influence current comic stories? I think there's, of course, there's some pulling and borrowing from. But yeah, the character design looked very much like Xanadu, I think was his name.
I forget.
Or Xanu.
Xanu.
Yeah. Xanu. Yeah. So
something that we haven't mentioned yet that that Alan Moore brought to the table is the way he writes Swamp Thing's cadence and the way he speaks.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate the cadence that he has the Swamp Thing speak in a very slow and deliberate way of speaking.
Yeah.
That when that is taken out of the Swamp Thing's dialogue and any other version, it just completely takes me out of the character. It's kind of like, I make the comparison every time somebody writes characters like Rogue without a Louisiana accent, or Dr. Doom without referring to himself in the third person. It's like it completely takes me out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's something I wanted to make sure and bring attention to, because it just, I really get a lot out of that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to change subject just a little bit, so go ahead.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is you juxtapose that with the what he does with Etrigan, speaking in the pentameter, Alan Moore's control and his study of the dialogue and his ability to. A lot of writers can't do that. A lot of writers, all their characters, at least in your head, they sound like they're speaking with the same accent. They sound like they're all from the same spot, so they're absolutely on the same colloquial level. Alan Moore can shift gears, like from panel to panel, and how people speak, and that's mastercraft. So I mean, I can't write an iambic pentameter period, so I'd never do justice to Etrigan. But
I've never seen anybody do it better than Garth Ennis, though. Garth Ennis writes the Demons dialogue better than anybody else I've ever seen.
I can't disagree with that at all. Yeah. I haven't read a whole lot of his stuff though, so that's also why. But he's also Garth Ennis, so on some level, are we sure that Garth Ennis just isn't Etrigan?
Could be. I don't know. What I was going to say that goes along with the talking is my earlier complaints about the lettering. I have to say that when they do the Swamp Thing lettering with the orange background, it's actually very, very well done and easy to read, which is not always the case when you have a colored background with black writing on it. It's not always easy to read. But they did a fantastic job lettering, especially the Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
And I know we don't talk about lettering a whole lot, but I think that needs to be pointed out, especially since I complained about the bleeding earlier.
Well, I
mean,
I think that's production value, right? I mean,
I think it's both. I think, I don't know who colors the word bubbles or who decides to color the word bubbles, but sometimes you see these where there's so the contrast between the background color and the words is so, I guess, not enough.
Right.
It makes it very hard to read. But they did a fantastic job with this. So whether that's editorial, production, the colorist, the letterer, I just want to point out that it was done well.
Before we, as we're wrapping this up, something else I want to make sure and bring attention to is John Totleben's work as the inker on this, and how, my God, man, what a series to freaking ink, man. Good Lord.
Yeah, well, and I can't help but draw parallels to Immortal Hulk and how much praise we give Rui Jose, because especially when you're dealing with some of these body horror pages and just the amount of just sheer like small parallel lines that goes into all the shading, like dude's nib had to be glowing red hot. Just
what? Oh man, yeah. Inking some of these pages where you have the Floronic Man and the Swamp Thing.
Right.
I mean, good Lord, dude, the inks
and many panels on a page, so it's not like you're inking large panels.
Well, jeez, hell, man. Go look at the page where they introduced the Fly, which we haven't really spoken about that. Behind everything that's happening with the Monkey King, you get Abigail's husband, who is having his alcoholic psychotic break, who wraps his car around a telephone pole, and while he's in there, makes the proverbial and in this case possibly literal deal with the devil to survive. But there's a fly that comes into being, and it's a speaking fly, so it's possessed by something. But just the amount of inking that he does in the eyeballs, just showing those little hexagons or whatever they are, that's just riddled in that page. It's like, dude, the steadiness of his hand is superhuman.
Well, and I also want to point out that Stephen Bissette has obviously seen a southern alligator snapping turtle before too, because that turtle is on point. That's it.
All the animals he did are crazy on point.
And it's weird because he actually brings the turtle to the forefront and put Swamp Thing in the back on that page. But sometimes people would see the panel that says have a turtle. They're just going to draw a turtle, but this dude actually drew an alligator snapping turtle from the South. So congrats to him on that for knowing what he was drawing.
Did the texture of these pages, just with the water lilies and everything, it's just I grew up around some of this scenery out in swamps of Arkansas, which is not the same thing as swamps of Louisiana or anything, but like you see a lot of the same stuff, and it's stunning.
Did you ever see the bog monster that looked like the Swamp Thing?
We called her Aunt Sharon. So no, I'm joking. I actually do have an Aunt Sharon who's not like the woman is gorgeous. So if my family's listening to this, I'm not talking shit about my actual aunt. She's a lovely person and is gorgeous. She's not a bog monster. I just didn't know what else to say at that moment.
You also have that Cronenberg looking dude towards the end. And man, there's just so much going on these pages. It's just remarkable.
I can't help but also think, all the work, all the labor that went into the artwork of this 75-cent comic book.
Right.
Yep.
It's like that kind of thing. That kind of thing I always kind of marvel at.
Yeah, their page rates weren't much back then, probably.
You think of a world now where we get books that are 28 pages, cost us $5, where the people don't put in backgrounds. It's just a solid color in the background, which sometimes that is a aesthetic choice and it works. Sometimes it's just to speed up the process. And I think that's what we all love about books like Immortal Hulk, is because you're getting so much texture and so much detail in those pages. It really does make it feel like you're getting the most bang for your buck. It's an economic value. You can spend longer with the pages to look and see what all's buried in there.
I could sit here and just flip through this book for days and just looking at the different pages and not even rereading it, just looking at the pages, specifically the swamp pages. But yeah, beautiful.
One of the things I wanted to give kudos to, and that I thought was really well done in this book, was the way that Alan Moore wrote and treated the autistic character in this book, the young children who are obviously special needs and everything. Alan Moore, I don't think is one of the most sensitive creatures on the planet. And 1984 was certainly not a time where, people were really concerned about let's be nice to everybody and let's respect people's feelings and disabilities and things. So the fact that the words that he chose to use in this story to describe people with autism, I don't even know if we knew what autism really was. Like I said, this is 3 years before I was born. But certainly even in the mid 90s and early 2000s, we didn't have an understanding really of, autism was not a thing that was widely spoken about. They used another word for kind of a blanket term that I'm not going to repeat because I don't like it. But just the way and the maturity with which he handled something that could have theoretically been easy, quote unquote, low hanging fruit for comedic value. He didn't use it for that.
You mean where they wrapped the children in mattresses?
Well, but I mean, that's a valid thing that people have had to do. Like like when somebody's being a danger to themselves, like that's something that they do. I'm talking about really using it, driving up, hey, let's laugh at the slow kids, quote unquote. Like they don't make them the punchline. And I appreciated that.
Well, so an interesting thing that's going on here in the politics of the real world at this time is this is about the time that Reagan changed the IQ level for state institutionalizing children.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a lot of children that had been institutionalized up to that point that were just being released on their own. So there, my mom had worked in an institution, and some of the things where Abigail's, I can't think of her husband's name, but where he's saying, what about the danger to you, so forth, that was a very real thing when my mom worked.
Oh, absolutely.
In the institution, but, they're in the background of the politics of the real world. Again, you're having all of that being changed. And I wonder if that didn't play into putting some of that into the comic at that point.
I bet it did.
Yeah.
I bet it did. Alan Moore? Shit.
Yeah.
I bet it did.
Like I said, he's got 4 fingers on the pulse of the world, things that aren't even at the forefront. So, it had to. I mean, I don't think you can ignore the fact that he deals with that he deals with climate change, that he deals with, the metamorphosis of morality.
In the extremism of trying to correct climate change.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. How you can go too far. How you can go too far either way with it, and finding the balance is the truth.
Well, or even the way that the Floronic Man manipulated mass media, blasting it out on television to do that. I mean, there's just so much, and it's impossible, I think, not to read it through the context of a 2021 or 2021 lens.
Well, when you said that, it made me think of when the guys outside like killing his lawn and chopping down the tree because they were scared of the plants. It just kind of cracked me up. But it also, the fear of your house plants coming alive and killing you had to be horrific for these people.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot to dissect in these books, and you could probably spend, as you could with any Alan Moore book, years dissecting them.
Yep.
8 you probably wouldn't want to dissect a lot of his Extreme Studio stuff. Probably wouldn't do yourself any favors with that. Those.
I mean, but even like Providence, which was one of the last books he's written.
Yeah.
I mean, you can take a deep dive into that series as well.
Yeah.
Not going to feel good after you're finished.
No, but you could take,
it'll be interesting.
Yeah, you could take a deep dive into that, or where he takes a shot at classic Hollywood in the name of that book is it's in my mind, but I can't get it out. I'm sorry. Cinema
Purgatorio.
Yeah, something like that.
Also, anyways, Avatar press book, I think.
Yeah, but his parts in that had to do with the behind the scenes in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
because it was just absolutely amazing, and all based on true stories of what happened in Hollywood, because I started looking them up to see how real they were.
Yeah.
So
in the grand scheme of things, I struggle with the way I conceptualize Alan Moore, because I genuinely and truly think that Alan Moore is the best comics writer currently alive. And I think that, like, for me, I'm just saying that for me alone, and other people may have other opinions, and I respect those, and, you know, so on and so forth. I personally think he is I think he's a genius. I think he is arguably the best comics writer alive. I also think that the modern version of him is kind of full of shit 90% of the time. So I struggle with that. But then you go back and you read this stuff, and you really have to just, you know, take awe at his mastercraft of what he puts into the work. You know, leaving a lot of his current issues with, yeah, he goes off at the mouth bitching about things. He's just an old curmudgeon at this point, which is fine. He's earned that right. But you read this book, so you read the books that Craig just listed. You go back and read, you know, the what do you get for the man who has everything? And when it comes to writing comics, he understands it in a way that I don't think that anybody else grasps the mechanics of. There are people who come close, but I don't know that anybody else is nearly as successful at doing what he does with the sequential page. And of course, that part of that is his ability to instruct his writers about what he's wanting, and also allow them to do the storytelling. So I love it. This is, again, if you look at anybody's lists of, you know, best superhero, you know, I'm using the term superhero loosely, but best DC series or best comics superhero series of all time, I don't think that you're going to find many lists that don't have Alan Moore's Swamp Thing on that list. And I think that's absolutely understandable. As I've read this again, I'm going to keep reading through my little omnibus and pouring through it, because it really is some ingenious writing for somebody who understands these characters better than possibly anybody other than the men who created them, and in some ways more so because he's allowed to change them. So,
I mean, it's hard to argue that point, that, you know, he took characters that existed, broke them down, rewrote them, and made them better. He did that quite often.
So, Craig, I know you sent us a text message yesterday, and it was the splash page at the end of, I want to say, the first or the second issue.
It's at the end of the first art.
Okay, yeah, where Swamp Thing's walking through the swamp doing the Jesus pose as he soaks in sun. And you said that if you know, your birthday was coming up and anybody wanted to buy you that page, they could. So, Matt, I'm curious, was there a page that stood out to you that if you could just reach in and pull out the original art in the art that we read?
Pick any of the Swamp Thing pages.
Yeah, the pages where he. Yeah, no, I'm not even going to try to pick one. Next.
If I had to pick one, it would be the double page spread that was on. Oh, what was this issue? I don't know what issue it was. It was the By Demons Driven. It's in the second arc, and it shows the Monkey King just being all gross and weird and nasty, and Etrigan slashing him and Swamp Things in the background. Everything about that double page spread just it speaks to me. I would love that. There's another one where Etrigan's eating the Monkey King that I thought was nasty in the best kind of way too. I would love to have that just because of the story aspect. So I'm glad that Matt planted this seed. Again, puns, yay. So I really enjoyed reading this. So any kind of final thoughts?
No, other than I'm going to be finishing the series. No.
Matt?
Read it, kids.
My final thought is that the raccoon in the second half is the MVP of the story. Also, that death by swordfish is not the way I want to go at all. That doesn't sound.
That made me think of the scene from the Boys television show where the dolphin flies out. That death was very similar.
I forgot about that scene. So, Well, all right. Well, that was fun. That was a neat little trip back to 1984. I'm gonna throw some pictures up on our Facebook group and Instagram pages of my copies of these. I encourage you all to do the same if you've got a copy of it. If anybody happens to know the history of the Rick Veitch and the Karen Berger of it all, because like I said, Matt and I had some, like, our copies said different things. So I'm curious about the history of that. I would love for somebody to educate me on the differences, if that's a modern thing, if that's a thing that they just kind of discovered and included, or what the story is on that, because that's very interesting in the history of it all. So
have you guys read Miracle Man?
I haven't. No.
Okay. You should, and we should do a deep dive on Alan Moore's part of Miracle Man at some point.
Okay. I'm game.
You should read it though.
Yeah.
Didn't Neil Gaiman do a big stint?
Neil Gaiman started on his stint, and then Eclipse, he had everything done. Eclipse Comics, who was producing it, got flooded and lost like the last, I want to say, 3 or 4 issues. His is incomplete. So when they re-released it at Marvel, they were supposed to, one of the reasons Neil Gaiman went there was to help finish writing that, and it never happened. So they re-released it, and then when they got to the point where it ended, we were supposed to get the final issues, and that never happened. So,
well, okay. Well, we'll put that on the short list of things we need to deep dive into. That'll be fun, because I've never read that. So,
yeah. Well, Alan Moore's is absolutely amazing and should be read by everybody.
Big facts. Big, and not just Watchmen. He's done other stuff.
No, I mean, Alan Moore's part of Miracle Man.
Oh, that too. But I thought you just said Alan Moore was required reading, and I was agreeing with you. But
he is.
The number of people who only have read Watchmen, like there's so much other stuff out there that is
movies that you've seen that you don't even know that he wrote.
Yep. So
V for Vendetta, From Hell, others.
Mm-hmm.
So
just he's the man.
Yep.
He is. But if you look around the world right now, that there are people who are trying their best to one day, they hope and they pray that they'll achieve a modicum of his success and abilities, and they're putting out new comics every week. And we all have the blessing, at least us on the show, have the blessing of being able to go out to our local comic book shop every Tuesday/Wednesday, whenever they come out, and pick up our little stack of funny books and take home. And I use that term obviously in jest, because they're not all funny, and really not all books, but that's neither here nor there. So what is coming out in this next week that you guys are excited about picking up?
You guys go ahead. I've got a few that I can choose from. So
he's me. Oh, I get to go first.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to do this justice. So there is a book coming out this next week that is by an artist that I just salivate over. The things that she puts on the page just make me drool, because they're gorgeous and they're sensual and they're sexy and they're otherworldly. And that artist is none other than Maria Lovett. And she has got a new series coming out called Luna. It's being published by Boom Studios. It's dropping this Wednesday. If you like what she did on Faithless, I got a feeling you're going to like this. It's a dark thriller, and she's both writing and drawing it. It's a young woman named Teresa she's got some weird dreams, some of which happen to come true, and they connect her with something akin to the divine. So she crosses paths with something that's not unlike a cult. She thinks exactly what you would think, but there's something deeper that she's got to dive into and figure out. It involves immortality and magic and alchemy and the true power of endearing love, and all those things wrap up into what is going to be Luna, and I cannot wait. I'm giddy over the chance to read this.
I'm looking at something that's coming out next week that looks interesting to me. It's from Image Comics. It's called Graphic Fantasy. This is actually a reprint of a 1982 fanzine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this has really got me curious. I really appreciate the old fanzines, a bygone era. So I'm going to check this out. This one happens to have the first appearance of, quote, the Dragon, Paul Dragon, which would later be known as the Savage Dragon.
Oh, wow.
Okay. What did you say this was called?
Graphic fantasy.
Nice. I'm going to go with a book from IDW called Chained to the Grave. It's Brian Level, Kate Sherman, and Andrew Eskenbach. Roy Mason has come back from the dead, chained to the headstone that marked his grave. It's a lawless time, a magical time, and the undead Roy soon finds himself caught between a rock and a hard place as he sets out in search of treasure. So, thought that the premise of that's pretty interesting.
I got a fourth if I can be so bold.
No.
Throwing a number 4.
You're going to put it out anyways.
I'm ignoring Matt and going to say that Craig told me I could. And that book
I
is.
don't even know why you ask.
It's an illusion.
There's the lawman that gave us 4 short stacks this morning, telling us that he
right. Always trying to rules for thee and not for he, I guess.
Right.
If that's the way it goes. No, there's a new number 1 coming out called Fear Case. Number 1 that I think that everybody needs to go grab, and not just because I think the story is going to be good, but also because it's a creative team that I think is badass, and that is Matt Kent with Tyler Jenkins and Hillary Jenkins. This is being produced by Dark Horse. It's Matt Kent. He produces good stuff. You've read Black Badge. You've read Mind Management that he did. Sorry, my brain just kind of shut off. The dude makes great stuff. And you also know Tyler and Hillary Jenkins because they've worked with him on quite a few of those things. And they are a incredible team. So it's a new detective series. It's horror. It is Fear Case number 1, and it should be on your pull lists. So go grab it.
Nice.
And that's going to make my life easier when I go to make a graphic to throw up on all the places that we put the stuff we talk about on, like our Instagram and Twitter page, that you can go follow us on at SFG Podcast. And you can come talk about your experience with swamp things or with things in the swamp, or, swordfish maybe, if you want to. And you can do that at our Facebook group. Facebook, it can be evil. It doesn't have to be. We have a little lively group of folks who come and they chit chat, they share memes, and they talk, and they do all kinds of fun stuff. And we would love it if you were a part of that.
And we keep the riffraff out. So
we really do. And that's not saying that we only allow like people who agree with us in there, because you all just listen to this episode. If we were just having people would agree with us, they wouldn't let Craig and I sit in the same room together, and that'd just be silly. But we do make sure that people it's cool to voice your opinion. It's cool to have an adverse opinion. You just can't be a dick about it. So we don't let that happen. And so join us if you want a little space where you can kind of learn to fall in love with comics culture again, if you fell out of love with it, because we know that struggle. We've been there. That's part of the reason we make this podcast, is because we were all looking around and it was just like, hey, comics culture and kind of starts to suck. Maybe we need to make a place that we can put a positive spin on things. And we hope we've done that. We work really hard at it. Well, at least I do. Matt wants you to be sad about things because he's mean like that. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode. We certainly did. As I poked the bear, this book was, to quote Matt, Absolute Swamp Thing was the bacon of comics, or if comics were bacon, to use that phrase. So go read it. Come join us. Tell your friends about the podcast. And if nothing else, we're going to give you the same little instructions throughout the week that we always do. Go forth and love some comics. Woo!